It's your turn now. She worked 3 jobs to stay afloat, skipped meals, skipped sleep. The debt wasn't even hers. Then one night, near closing time, a woman bought 1 can of soup and left her something in the bag. What was inside made her drop to the floor. Hi everyone, welcome to the Pillow Files. Let's get started. Mira's alarm rang at 4:45 a.m., its harsh buzz tearing through the thin motel walls. She lay awake anyway, having drifted into a fitful doze only an hour before. Her tiny room was cold and dim, lit by a single bulb above the door that flickered whenever the wind rattled the ancient window panes. She ran a hand through her hair, which was tied back in the same ratty elastic she'd been using for weeks. The elastic was stretched thin, fraying and barely able to hold back her strands. Her scalp itched when she tugged at it, but she didn't dare replace the band. It was the only hair tie she owned. With a sigh, Mira swung her legs over the side of the narrow bed. The thin mattress poked her ribs, and her bare feet met the cold linoleum floor. She paused, closing her eyes, and let out a long breath. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon's last shift. She rose and pulled on her worn hoodie and jeans, the fabric faded and stained from days of constant wear, knowing full well she couldn't afford another load of laundry until payday, if there even was a payday this month. In the corner of the room sat her small dented mini-fridge, humming quietly. Inside, a single container of yogurt teetered on its last day before expiration. She would eat it cold, no microwave, because the motel's tiny kitchen had a habit of shutting off unexpectedly. She filled a chipped enamel mug with tap water that tasted faintly of rust and took the yogurt into the single-bowl bathroom. She pinched her cheek, wincing at the dull ache that radiated from her jaw. She could feel the remnants of the nightly jaw-clenching that came with too much worry. She swallowed the yogurt slowly, cutting off thoughts of hunger by focusing on its slightly sour taste. Afterward, she rinsed out the mug in the tiny sink, stepped into her worn sneakers, and grabbed her backpack. Inside were a few stale buns from last night's shift at the discount grocery store, wrapped loosely in a scrap of cloth. She slung the pack over one shoulder and exhaled. The day awaited. 6 hours at the bakery, 4 hours cleaning motel rooms, then a shift at the grocery store until 1 a.m. Repeat, until there was nothing left of her. She closed the motel door behind her and pushed into the pre-dawn chill. The street lamps cast halos of yellow light onto empty sidewalks. Mira's breath curled in front of her, each exhale a cloud of anxiety. She pointed her feet in the direction of the bakery, a 20-block walk that took her 40 minutes at her fastest pace. As she trudged along, she felt the soles of her shoes thinning. Soon, water would leak in on rainy mornings. She quickened her step a little, eager to reach the bakery before the dough mixers came to life, but not so fast that she'd collapse from exhaustion mid-block. By 5:30 a.m., the sky was a faded slate. The bakery's neon sign, long since burnt out, bulbs replaced by taped-over letters, glowed dimly. STRB. Pastries. Mira pushed through the back door and flicked on the overhead lights. The ovens were still warm from the night crew, and the scent of day-old muffins lingered in the air. She tied on her stained apron, one that bore the initials of her ex-boyfriend, who had used her credit to take out $18,000 in debt before vanishing. At least the apron fit. Everything else she owned felt either too small or too worn to be worth keeping. She filled a large stainless steel bowl with flour and water, kneading the dough until her knuckles creaked. The metal countertop was icy under her palms, and she felt a twinge in her wrist, probably from repetitive strain, but she would ignore it. Ignoring pain was part of her job. The head baker, a burly man named Carlos, arrived at 6 a.m., his heavy boots thudding against the concrete floor. He nodded to Mira, and she offered an awkward smile. He didn't expect cheer. Nobody did. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. Mira forced her lips into a slight grin. "Yeah, just got tired eyes," she mumbled. Carlos gave a quick nod and turned back to his station. They both knew the truth. Sleep had been a stranger since her boyfriend fled. She sighed inwardly and returned her focus to the dough. Before long, the ovens roared, racks slid, and she was portioning loaves, sliding bread pans onto trays, checking the timers. Her hands shook slightly, but she steadied them, unwilling to draw attention or sympathy. She placed each loaf into the hot oven with deliberate care, inhaling the faint sweetness of rising dough as it escaped into the frigid morning air. By 8 a.m., the bakery filled with early customers. A nurse grabbing a cinnamon roll to take two. Her shift, a jogger peeling off wet gloves for a bagel and coffee. A pair of college students clutching textbooks. Mira served them one by one, her practiced smile in place. Each transaction felt like a small victory against her own despair. She took their money, counted change, slid paper-wrapped pastries to them. But despite the dough, despite the sugar-scented warmth, her heart felt as if it were hollowing out. At 10 a.m., she locked the cash register and took a short break. She sat on the edge of a wooden stool, peeled off her apron, and reached into her backpack for a soggy bun. She nibbled at it, closing her eyes and letting herself feel the dough's texture. Rough shifts gave her perspective on real hunger. She glanced at the clock. 10:30 a.m. In 30 minutes, she'd switched to the motel's shift. She forced herself to rise and shook out her hoodie sleeves. She walked back to the motel on tired legs, stepping onto the creaky wood porch of a faded, two-story building. The manager's office smelled of mothballs and stale cigarettes. She signed in with a plastic keycard, then fetched the cleaning cart. By 11 a.m., she was in room 104, where a family of 4 had checked out at dawn. The carpets were sticky, with spilled juice, and a broken plastic toy lay in pieces by the bed frame. She threw on rubber gloves and swept up shards of broken trinkets, pouring bleach on the stained carpet. Her hands ached from wielding the spray bottle, but she moved methodically, imagining the germs evaporating under the strong chemical scent. She stripped the bed linens, stained pillowcases, sheets peppered with crumbs, a faded blanket that smelled of smoke. She made a mental note to demand a new comforter on her next break. But for now, she tossed everything into the dirty laundry bin and redid the bed, tucking the crisp new sheets tightly under the mattress. She wiped down tables, polished the dusty lampshades, and replaced the used towels. By the time she finished, room 104 at 12:30 p.m., she was drenched in sweat, and her back protested every motion. She hurried back to the manager's desk to sign off room 104 and claimed room 112 next. Another couple had stayed there, and the carpet bore dried ketchup stains. The bathroom held a layer of toothpaste and hair in the drain. She fumbled with the toilet bowl cleaner, scrubbing until her wrists ached from the repetitive motion. By 1 p.m. she was exhausted. The thought of sitting for even a minute tempted her, but no real rest awaited. The grocery store shift began in 5 hours. She moved to room 118, where a teenager had left empty takeout containers scattered across the floor and a lingering smell of cigarette smoke. She propped open a window, letting the late morning breeze carry away the stench while she diligently cleaned. At times, she choked on the acrid odor of stale smoke. Each breath felt like a battle between lung and tile cleaner. By 5 p.m., her tasks were done. She had cleaned 4 rooms, restocked toilet paper and tissues, and wiped fingerprints off the lobby door. Her uniform smelled faintly of bleach and sweat, an odor she would carry until her shift at the grocery store ended. She showered quickly in the motel's communal bathroom, her limbs shaking beneath the hot spray. She scrubbed until her skin glowed pink, then dressed in fresh jeans and a thin jacket. She grabbed her backpack, which now held only half of the stale buns from the bakery, a bottle of water, and the motel key. At 5:45 p.m., she stepped onto the cracked pavement outside the motel and headed toward the grocery store. The sun had dipped behind low buildings, and the streetlights flickered on one by one. By the time she reached the store, a neon sign gleamed over the entrance. Discount grocery. Open 24 hours. She sighed. The doors slid open with a mechanical whoosh. She clocked in, grabbed her apron, and pushed a rack of empty grocery baskets to the front of aisle 2. ready to begin her overnight grind. Her first task was restocking. Shelves of canned beans, expired yogurts pulled off shelves and rotated to the back, pallets of instant noodles and bleach. The ceiling tiles in the storage area were stained brown, from countless drips, and Mira stepped carefully to avoid dark puddles. She wiped down the shelves with a damp cloth, listened to the hum of flickering fluorescent lights overhead. Her spine ached, and her feet throbbed inside thin shoes. But she continued, stacking cans, rotating stock, wiping away dust. The other stockers had warned her to watch the clock. They dreaded the graveyard shift just as much, but someone had to do it. At 8:00 p.m. she moved to her register. A long counter of faded formica separated her from a worn vinyl stool that she could never truly sit on. She was expected to stand for the entire shift, measuring her tolerance in hours until 1 a.m. The late-night crowd trickled in, giggling, teenagers buying energy drinks, single parents picking up eggs and milk for a midnight dinner, insomniac truck drivers grabbing bags of chips and cans of soda. Each beep of the scanner felt like a drop of cold water splashing on her skin, reminding her how many seconds remained until she collapsed. Around 11:30 p.m., the store was mostly empty. She had 1 hour left. She took a quick break in the back, storage room, where she leaned against a stack of cardboard boxes and closed her eyes. For a moment, she let her mind drift, picturing the day when she would be free of this schedule, when she could draw again, paint on a large canvas, create, art for the joy of creation. But reality returned, bills to pay and mouths to feed. She checked her phone, no new messages. Her mother had stopped calling. She didn't want to lie, didn't want to say, "I'm all right" anymore. As she stepped back to her register, she noticed an elderly woman approach. The woman's coat was 2 sizes too big, draped around her thin frame like a cocoon. Her eyes were sharp but tired, lines etched deep into her face from decades of laughter and tears. She wheeled a basket, with a single can of soup inside. Mira scanned the soup, bagged it, and started to hand it across the counter. As she did, the woman's hand slid from the edge of the basket to Mira's name tag. Mira felt a sudden chill. "You remind me of my daughter," the old woman said quietly, voice soft as a sigh. "She used to work herself to the bone just, like you, until someone helped her." The woman looked away, down at the soup can as if the label held a secret message. Then she reached into her coat pocket and withdrew an envelope, crisp and white, folding it over the top of the bagged groceries. She pressed it there, her gaze never leaving Mira's. Mira's heart fluttered. "Ma'am, I can't." The woman shook her head, offering a thin smile that revealed just how much older she must be. "Just take it, dear. Someone saw you today. It's your turn now." And with that, she turned and shuffled toward the exit, disappearing into the night. Mira stood frozen as the automatic doors whooshed closed behind the woman. The envelope felt impossibly heavy in the paper bag. She closed her eyes for a moment, then sank to the cold tile floor between aisle 3 and the employee time clock. She pressed the bag to her chest and slowly slid down, tears finally escaping. She didn't cry because the money would fix everything. Her debts were far deeper than $600, and new bills would come by morning. She cried because someone had seen her, not as a cashier, not as another shift worker, but as a human being drowning in a sea of obligations. For the first time in months, she let herself feel the ache of exhaustion, the weight of her fraying hope, and the strange, and a glimmer that maybe, someday, things might look different. She sat there until her knees throbbed, until her cheeks were wet and her vision blurred. Finally, she wiped her face on the sleeve of her uniform, rose slowly, and tucked the envelope into her pocket. She finished, her shift in a daze, clocked out at 1 a.m. and walked home under a moonless sky. The envelope burned a reassuring weight against her thigh as she walked. When she reached the motel office, still closed for the night, She quietly let herself into her room and locked the door behind her. She sat on the edge of her bed, breathing in its threadbare mattress smell, and extracted the envelope. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. 6 crisp $100 bills lay inside, $600 in cash. Beneath them was a small handwritten note. "It's your turn now." She stared at the words, tracing the gentle curve of the letters with her fingertip. She thought of the woman's words. "You remind me of my daughter." She let that memory settle deep inside her, carrying the warmth of recognition, as if that woman had placed a seed of hope into her chest. She lay back, pulling the thin blanket over her, and cried again. This time softly, not in fear or hopelessness, but in a strange relief, as though she had finally exhaled the pain she'd held for so long. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. Still the same shifts, still the same struggle. But as she drifted into an exhausted sleep, she clutched those $600 like a talisman against despair. For now, at least, she was seen. And she believed, if only for a moment, that she might begin to stand on her own again. Love this story? Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories that reveal the quiet power of kindness. Don't forget to check out the video currently on your screen. You won't want to miss what happens when a single moment changes everything. See you in the next one.